There has been a lot in the news this year. Floods, wildfires, elections, assassinations, a big, huge government shutdown, even a jewel heist. It's hard to keep track of what happened, even for me, and I do this for a living. But thanks to the gift of modern technology, I can tell you what you were most interested in knowing about this year and offer a couple updates. I'm Caitlyn Becker, and this is the New York Postcast's Top 5 of 2025. Beginning at number 5, this is, after all, a countdown. The shocking murders and attempted murders of Minnesota lawmakers and their families. Dressed in a police uniform and a creepy Halloween mask, authorities say Vance Belter shot and killed a former Minnesota House Speaker, Melissa Hortman, and her husband Mark when they came to the door of their home on a Saturday morning back in June. Belter also allegedly fired shots at the home of another lawmaker, seriously injuring State Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette earlier that same morning. Now, they have both thankfully recovered. Police narrowly missed nabbing the suspect as he fled from the Hortmans' home because they were over at the Hoffmans from the earlier shooting. It didn't take him long to put two and two together. In his rush to outrun the cops, which he managed for a bit, Belter left behind a manifesto of sorts, listing dozens of possible political targets, including Governor Tim Walz. It was basically a hit list. Authorities also found a cache of weapons, including an AR-15 style rifle, as well as a letter addressed to FBI Director Kash Patel. Now, Belter was captured by authorities after a 2-day manhunt. So what about his motive? Well, Belter, who is very clearly unhinged, said the names on his list were people who were, quote, getting massive financial amounts from the Chinese government, and he only meant to conduct citizens' arrests. You'll be shocked to learn that authorities say that's, quote, fantasy. Now, Belter was indicted on 6 federal charges and could face the death penalty, which at his latest hearing in November, prosecutors said was still under consideration. His next hearing is likely to take place sometime in February. Story number 4, the catastrophic flooding in Texas Hill Country, which led to the deaths of over 100 people, including 25 young campers and 2 camp counselors at Camp Mystic. 4 months worth of rain in just a matter of hours was dumped in the areas surrounding the Guadalupe River, causing it to swell to 30 feet. This was in the early hours of July 4th. The deluge caused a flash flood that swept through Camp Mystic, the Christian girls' camp, where some of the girls, according to a new lawsuit, were told to stay put until the waters receded. Exhaustive investigations questioned everything from the emergency response to a lack of warning systems to the camp's owners. Some of the cabins were built within the flood zone. Now, the owners have pledged to reopen the camp, and they promised updated safety protocols that were outlined in a new law, the Heavens 27 Safety Act, that was passed with the support of some of the parents of the victims. The New York Times obtained an email from Camp Mystic to parents that reads in part, "We are not only rebuilding cabins and trails, but also a place where laughter, friendship, and spiritual growth will continue to flourish." The owners also say they'll build a memorial to the victims. But some parents are outraged at the decision to rebuild at all, and they've now taken that outrage to the courts. Families of 7 of the girls and counselors killed in the flood filed a wrongful death suit in mid-November against the camp's owners, seeking more than $1 million in damages. The petition claims Camp Mystic, quote, put profit over safety and chose to house young girls in flood-prone areas to avoid the cost of relocating cabins. And camp leaders are also accused of choosing to move cars and equipment ahead of the devastation, rather than using that time to order an evacuation of the people on the grounds. And even now, all these months later, not everyone who went missing in the floods has been found. Texas Rangers continue to search for 63-year-old Jeffrey Ramsey and 8-year-old Seal Stewart, a first-year camper at Camp Mystic. Coming in at 3. The Jumbotron snuggle that had everyone obsessed. Of course, I'm talking about the Coldplay Kiss Cam couple. It all began at a concert outside of Boston. One of the band's sets featured a romantic moment where a camera pans the audience to capture canoodling couples, and this night was no different. A man and a woman were swaying to the music, looking positively smitten, and then you surely remember what happened next. They spotted themselves on the Jumbotron, and the woman dove out of the frame like an Olympic diver while the man just stood there looking guilty AF. And Chris Martin joked,
either they're having an affair or they're just very shy.
It turns out he was right. The couple was already coupled up with other people. Andy Byron, the CEO of tech firm Astronomer, and Kristen Cabot, the company's head of HR, were both married to other people. And if you didn't catch that little thing, what I just said there, same company. Yeah, he was her boss too. Within a week, each of them stepped down from their jobs. The internet raked them over the coals. And then we all moved on. But what happened since? Well, 2 months after the ordeal, he and his wife were spotted together with their wedding rings still on, strolling around Kennebunk, Maine, and then enjoying a romantic sunset picnic on the beach. So all appeared to be forgiven for old Andy, maybe? We got even more evidence in November when Byron sold his Manhattan apartment, where Astronomer is based, for $5.8 million, and the paperwork suggested that the pair was still together with a permanent address in Massachusetts. Cabot, on the other hand, well, she filed for divorce from her husband about a month after getting caught on concert candid camera. Her husband told People magazine that the two were already separated at the time of the moment. And a source close to Cabot told People, quote, there was no affair. It was inappropriate to be hugging your boss at a concert, and she accepts full responsibility for it, but the scandal, the downfall, the loss of the job, all of that is unfair. Coming in at number 2 of the stories that you were most gripped by, the brazen public slaying of a Ukrainian immigrant in Charlotte, North Carolina. At the end of August, a woman by the name of Irina Zarutska was riding on the light rail when the maniac sitting behind her for seemingly no reason whatsoever suddenly stabbed her multiple times. The murder was quick, it was violent, and it was caught on camera. Surveillance footage shows Irina sitting quietly looking down at her phone when out of nowhere, another passenger plunges a knife into her. The victim seemed not to even know what hit her. In images released by police immediately following the attack, she's seen curled up in her seat looking utterly bewildered. The faces of her fellow passengers mirrored her own shock as she lay dying. Now, police believe the attack was completely random, and the man who was arrested and charged with stabbing Irina to death, DeCarlos Brown Jr., is a homeless ex-convict with a mile-long rap sheet. Brown has a minimum of 13 arrests in his past, and prior to this one, the most recent was in January, where he was released on cashless bail. Now, as for why Irina was targeted, during a jailhouse phone call with his family, Brown reportedly admitted to them that he stabbed Zarutska because he believed she was reading his mind. His sister later revealed him to be a paranoid schizophrenic. Charlotte's Mayor Vi Lyles really stepped in it with this one after making a statement seeming more sympathetic to the accused killer than the woman killed. And the story made it all the way to the White House, with President Trump weighing in multiple times on the tragedy. Now, life had not been kind to Irina before this either. Not long before she was murdered, she had fled war-torn Ukraine for a safer life here in the United States. In late October, nearly 2 months to the day after the stabbing, a grand jury indicted DeCarlos Brown Jr. on federal charges, making him eligible for the death penalty if convicted. And that is on top of an additional state charge for murder. And finally, the biggest story of 2025 was the shocking public assassination of Charlie Kirk. The conservative influencer and founder of Turning Point USA was holding an event on the campus of Utah Valley State University in September when he was brutally gunned down in front of an audience of thousands. This act of political violence left his wife, Erica, a widow, and 2 young children fatherless. A good friend of President Trump, Kirk's funeral saw the likes of Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and the president himself offer eulogies.
Our greatest evangelist for American liberty became immortal. He's a martyr now for American freedom. I know I speak for everyone here today when I say that none of us will ever forget Charlie Kirk, and neither now will history.
A manhunt for the shooter went on for 2 days until, on September 12th, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson was arrested and subsequently charged with multiple serious offenses, including aggravated murder. For more on the biggest story of the year, I want to bring in now the Post's deputy managing editor, Michael Zenny. So, Michael, let's start here with the alleged shooter, Tyler Robinson. What have we learned about him? What has the investigation around him uncovered?
Yeah, so
Honestly, we have not learned very much in recent weeks, and that's not terribly surprising. In cases like this, basically what's happening is that the prosecutors are compiling their evidence, preparing for trial. They're haggling over discovery, things like that. So there's not a lot of new details that have come out. We've sent reporters multiple times back out to southern Utah where he and his partner lived, and really everyone is quite buttoned up. The one thing that we do know is that neither hide nor hair of Tyler's partner has been seen, and the FBI is not talking about where this person is, leading some to speculate that the partner could potentially be in witness protection. The FBI has said that the partner is still a cooperating witness, however.
And from what we know, when the incident happened, the partner of Tyler Robinson, as you said, was cooperating, but was something that he allegedly communicated with that very day, apparently, about this. So that seems like a very important witness, which would make sense to me why the feds would be protecting this person ahead of trial.
Yeah.
Just kind of conspiracy theory wise there. So can you walk me through the timeline for this case? I mean, what's coming up? What's coming next?
Yeah, so our next hearing in this case is not until the beginning of the middle and end of January. Actually, there are two court dates in January, and it looks like a lot of the haggling is actually, honestly, over sort of media coverage and how Tyler Robinson appears in court, appears before the camera. There was a big ruling saying that he could appear in civilian clothes because his defense lawyers are concerned that these hearings are being broadcast widely all over the country. And there's still some questions about media access, things like that. And then also they're talking about the evidence. Discovery discussions are always a huge part of the trial. And I do not believe a trial date has been set just yet, or finalized, certainly.
Now, I want to talk a little bit now about Charlie Kirk. Now, in life, Charlie Kirk was a polarizing figure. I think the brazenness of the assassination really took people by surprise, even those who had maybe been his critics throughout his career. I mean, what was the political impact of his death?
Yeah, I think that a big part of it is that there is a huge new spotlight on violence in political rhetoric. I think a lot of people have realized that violent rhetoric is now very dangerous. Words can turn into actions quite quickly. And frankly, this is something that we're seeing, accentuated by the relatively new release of documents around Thomas Crooks, the would-be Trump assassin as well. He was talking about political violence and then ultimately, fired at the president. And I think it's really focused a lot of people on, how dangerous this can be with violent words becoming violence.
Yeah, because violent rhetoric is just that. It's rhetoric. And what we're talking about here is real action. These are human lives. I mean, in this podcast episode alone, where we're going through the biggest stories that Post readers were interested in, we have two instances of political assassinations. And that's not something that's been common in my decades-long career as a journalist, and I'm sure you would say the same thing, but it does seem to be ramping up, certainly this year. Now, that was the political impact of the actual incident, but what about Charlie's lasting legacy or impact when it comes to his work? He's gone now, but Turning Point USA certainly is not. In fact, it's rapidly growing.
Yeah, and they are continuing his campus debates as well, all over the country. They've continued the tour, and his wife Erica has been very much at the forefront of making sure that Turning Point is still doing this outreach to young people, trying to convince them that conservatism is the way to go, right? There are more than 800 chapters, I believe, now in college campuses. There are hundreds more in high schools. And they said that they've gotten, 35,000 plus requests for information about the organization. So it's certainly very much alive and well. I think the other thing, though, on the other side of this, what's interesting is you've also seen fractures starting to fissures starting to form in the conservative movement in Charlie's absence. I think there's a lot of people who are talking about how Charlie Kirk was this very principled, very driven, very thoughtful voice in the conservative movement. And with him gone, there's now a huge discussion about sort of who's in, who's out. Nick Fuentes, there's a massive schism in MAGA right now over whether or not he's an acceptable person within the movement. With Tucker Carlson, who did speak at Charlie's funeral, doing a chummy interview with Fuentes and being criticized in some corners for it, and others saying, no, this is someone who we need to be having a conversation with, even though he is a avowed white nationalist.
The message of Turning Point USA was Charlie Kirk's message. So now that there are different mouthpieces, how that message is said and how it's being heard are very, very different. So it will be fascinating for us to revisit this time next year to see what a difference a year without Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA not only means for the organization, the group, young conservatism, the MAGA base, all of it. And of course, that's just as we're going to be, after we head to the midterms. So we could be having a completely different conversation about that. Now, before I let you go, I do want to ask you, just from your perspective at the Post, why do you think this particular story was so big and so impactful for readers? I mean, unfortunately, in journalism, there is that old adage, if it bleeds, it leads. It is such a crass and unfortunate thing, but it is something that's what people tune into television for, television news. That is what they click on. That is what they buy papers for. We report on murders all the time. It's tragic, but it's the truth. Why was this so incredibly fascinating, impactful, poignant for readers?
Well, I think the primary reason is because it was so horrifying. I mean, when I'm a very old man and I've worked in this industry a very, very, very long time. And I've never quite seen a newsroom reaction, a visceral reaction, as I have to this story. I mean, Parkland was like that. Sandy Hook was like that. I mean, it is not dissimilar. And I think part of it is that he was a young man. He was not a politician. He was not representing high office. And then there was the gruesomeness of his death. I mean, it was because he was killed in the middle of a speech at, an event full of people. His death was recorded broadcast within seconds, right? Within seconds, it was on Twitter. The video, multiple videos of his death is just gut-wrenching, horrible.
It was so shocking that when those videos cropped up, a lot of people were saying that can't be real. That cannot be real, because you almost can't wrap your head around the fact that even in the most of us don't have that much hate in our heart about someone that we would conceive of doing that in a public place in front of all of those people. In a way, he has children. He's children. That's going to live on the internet forever.
Yeah.
It's
and I think that's
wild.
a huge part of it. I think that's a huge part of it.
And it just also seemed there was on top of that, I mean, from the journalistic standpoint, from where I'm sitting, the manhunt as well, because it happened and this person, an arrest wasn't immediately made. You had more people being like, okay, who did this? How did this happen? What's the next step? But I mean, Zenny, our team, we call him, Michael is usually what we call you, but we affectionately call you Zenny in the newsroom. Our team here at the Post did a really incredible job with reporting on this story and just sticking with it from, beginning to end. So I just want to commend you for such an amazing job.
Thank you so much.
And of course, you are a stalwart guest here on the Postcast, and we thank you for all of your many, 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 many contributions to all of our episodes. Even that one time that you made fun of me for going to the Louvre.
Multiple times. It was a humble brag if ever there was one.
Our Michael Zenny, thank you so much.
All right. Thanks a lot. Take care.
As I said at the start of the episode, so much news has happened in the last 12 months. The New York Post team has been on top of it all, and I am so grateful to be able to bring all of that to you right here on the New York Postcast Monday through Friday. I'm always here. Before we know it, we're going to be talking about all the big headlines happening in 2026, and you won't want to miss a single one of them. So make sure that you like and follow the New York Postcast wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube.